Corinthians 9:15 through 18. But I have used none of these things for my part, I have never availed myself of any of these rights. I have made no use of any of these rights, never taken advantage of any such right. Neither have I written these things that it should be so done unto me, nor intended to claim it in this letter, nor am I writing to secure any such provision. I am not writing this now so that I become an illustration of this. For it is better for me to die. I had rather die. Would die sooner than that any man should make my glory void. Then let anyone deprive me of this, my source of pride. No one shall make me my boast on empty boast. So Paul's saying, yeah, I had a right to this, but I ain't going to proclaim this because what I want to proclaim is Christ. What I boast about is Him, and you're not going to take it away from me. You're not going to take away the fact that the Lord's worked in my life. The Lord's seen me through. Verse 16. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. What am I proud of is not mere preaching of the gospel. Proclaiming the gospel gives me not ground for boasting. So Paul's saying, you think I have right for boasting. You think I'm boasting, but I'm not. I preach the gospel. Glory to Him. I'm not boasting about it, but boasting in Him. For necessity is laid upon me, and boasting in Him is praise Him. Necessity compels me to do this, for I am compelled to do so by order of my master. So Paul's saying, I ain't preaching because I want to. I believe it is the one he had, but he preached because God called him to preach. The want to could have faded away. I'm sure there was times where he really didn't want to for whatever reason. But he did want to please the Lord, and that's what kept him going. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel, for curse is upon me if I do not. Would mean woe is me if I did not preach the gospel. Paul knew that he was called to do this. Paul knew that he had to do this. We have a calling. We need to seek the Lord for a calling. If we don't know it, we need to seek Him to serve in our calling, because that's what He wants us to do. Seek Him always, though. Okay, verse 17 and verse 18. We'll cover them real quick. Okay. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. For were my service of my own free choice, I might claim wages to be reward my labor. If I do this work because I choose to do, so then I am entitled to a reward. If I were volunteering my services of my own free will, then the Lord would give me a special reward. But if against my will, but since I serve by compulsion, a dispensation, we see him having conflict here, but submission. Dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. If it were not more than the steward to discharge his trust. I am a slave entrusted with a stewardship, entrusted with a commission. So Paul's saying, and this isn't saying that people who preach shouldn't get paid, but it is saying that if they're called by God, they're going to preach whether they get paid or not. And that's Paul's main point. Paul's point is whether you pay me or not, I'm called to preach. You don't have to give me a wage. I know what I'm called to do, and I know I'm going to do it. And for us, that's the way it is with our calling. Yes, pastoral ministry, Paul does address, should get paid. And Paul should have been received as the other disciples. But him not being wasn't a reason for him to stop doing what God had called him to do. And for us, whether we're received by whoever, shouldn't stop us from doing what we're called to do in the Lord. Whether we get paid, whether we receive money for it or not, it should not matter. We're called to Him. Look at verse 18. Verse 18. What is my reward then? Verily that when I preach the gospel, what can I expect in the way of reward? And is my reward just this, when I tell the good news? In that case, what pay should I get? My pay is that in my preaching I may not make the gospel of Christ without charge, to make glad tidings free of cost. It won't let it cost anybody anything, to present the good news free for all cost. That I abuse not my power in the gospel, so as not to use to fulfill my right in the gospel, that I might forego as a right in the evangelist, to make but a sparing use of the rights which it gives me. So what Paul saying is here is there's certain things that get paid wages. The gospel isn't intended to be to where we make money off of it. The gospel is to be pure. The gospel should be heard whether people can afford to pay for it or not. People shouldn't have to pay to hear the gospel. Preachers ain't paid because so they hear the gospel. Preachers should willingly share the gospel. They get paid for their pastoral service or time, but not to share the gospel. Although sometimes it seems like that isn't the intention. And that's what Paul's saying. Gospel should be heard free of charge. It ain't our work that we did, but the work he did. Are we being paid? Was Paul really intending to be paid for work Christ did? No, of course not. But too many preachers today kind of look at that. They wouldn't preach unless they got paid. They have a job, not a calling. Paul had a calling and counted it as his duty. We need to find our calling and do the